Alright, these are our notes for section 1-2, and section 1-2 is on understanding and applying the idea of between. So real quick, we're going to review a couple of the vocabulary words that specifically go with this idea of between. First one is a line segment. And remember, a line segment is a piece or part of a line. To name it, remember we use a little line segment above, and you can measure it. Alright, because when we use this idea of between, you're going to be finding how long a specific line segment is. So that's important, the fact that you can measure it. I could take a ruler or give it some arbitrary number and say that it's this many units long. Okay, so that's a line segment. Between means in the middle of. And specifically when we talk about line segments, it's in the middle of two endpoints. Okay, here's a picture for between. Here's my line segment. Let's make it line segment AB because I referred to that earlier. Line segment AB, and I could put point C somewhere between those two as long as it's on the line segment and it's in the middle of them. Okay? Last idea is congruent. It means two line segments are equal or have the same measure. They would be the same length. Okay? To show that, we use hash marks. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the congruent symbol. This is the congruent symbol. If you ever see that, that means two things are congruent, that they're equal. We would use hash marks. So here's an example. Here's my line segment. Let's make it X and Y. And we'll put Z between them. Now, if XZ is congruent to ZY, I would put hash marks if that were the exact middle. Okay, if it were in the middle and these two other pieces were the same length, I'd put those hash marks on there. Okay, so those are the words you need to know for this particular section. A big idea, and this is a huge idea in this section, is that two smaller pieces will add to the whole thing. And this is a huge idea. We use this for the whole year, whether we talk about angles or shapes. If we take two specific pieces of the same figure, the same line, and we add them together, we're going to get the whole thing. So here's what I mean in terms of a picture. We've got XY, that's this part of our line segment, our big line segment. We have YZ, which is this piece. And if we add those two together, it equals the whole thing. Equals XZ. Now, you think that's a basic idea. It catches a lot of people, okay? That the two smaller pieces will always add to the whole thing. And we're going to use that idea in our examples today, okay? So we've got 4 examples we're going to look at. Before we get to actually working at the examples, there's a couple things I want you to do, and this is for the rest of the year, okay? Whenever we have problems like this with pictures. First thing you need to do is draw a picture, if they didn't give you one. If they gave you a picture, there's no need to redraw it. Use the one they gave you, okay? So always draw a picture. Second step is to label the picture with the information they give you, okay? Always label it. That will help you see what's going on, and then you can make an equation. And after you've labeled it, you write an equation. And solve. Last step is to answer the question. Sometimes questions will just ask for a variable. Other times they're going to ask you how long a particular segment is, so you may have to do some extra work. Don't assume that even though you solve the equation that you're completely finished. Make sure you answer the question. So these 4 things you always need to do. Draw a picture if they didn't give it to you. Label your picture. Write an equation and solve it. And then answer the question. Okay? So let's look at example number 1. AC is 5 inches, CB is 6 inches. We want to know how long AB is. Well, they gave us a picture. If we look at our picture, A and B are the endpoints, and C is between them. It's in between those 2 points. They gave us a picture, so we can skip the first step. Next thing we need to do is label it. Well, it says AC is 5 inches, CB is 6 inches, and we want to know how long AB is, how long the whole thing is. Pretty basic, okay? I do want you to write an equation, though. So, remember that big idea I told you, the 2 smaller pieces add to the whole. So if I take AC, which is 5, one of the small pieces, and I add it to the other small piece, CB, which is 6, I'm going to get AB. Well, 5 plus 6 is 11 inches. So there's the answer to my problem, 11 inches. And make sure you label your answer correctly. If I gave you inches or centimeters or whatever, you need to make sure that's on your answer. So that's what our problems are going to look like when we do our homework. Pretty straightforward. They're not all going to be that easy. That one doesn't have any variables in it. Example 2 is more typical of what you'll see. It's got some variables in it. It uses the variable x. Our directions say determine the value of x in the measure of TS. And then it tells us that RS is 48 plus x feet, RT is 24 feet, and TS is 2x feet. So they gave us a picture first, or the second thing we need to do, since they gave us a picture, is to label it. RS is 48 plus x feet. RT is 24 feet. And TS is 2x feet. Alright, now we need to set up an equation. That's the third thing we need to do. We're going to use that big idea again, that the 2 smaller pieces will add to the whole. Well, here's my first small piece, 24, plus my second small piece, 2x, equals the whole thing, which is 48 plus x. Now that I have my equation, I can solve it. I'm going to take 48 to the other side. And now, remember, there's more than one way to solve an equation. This isn't the only way to do it. Okay? So if you solve it a little differently, that's fine, as long as you get the same answer. 24 minus 48 is negative 24, plus 2x equals x. Let's subtract my 2x now. Remember, I want to get x's all on one side by themselves. These cancel. So negative 24 equals negative x. Not quite done yet because x needs to be positive, so I'm going to divide by negative 1. And x equals 24. Okay, now I want to answer the question. If we go back to our question up here, it says determine the value of x, which we did. X is 24. We're half done. And the measure of TS. We need to know how long TS is. Alright, and we know TS is 2x. Well, we found x to be 24, so I'm going to plug in my x. 2 times 24 is 48. So there would be my answer, 48 feet. Now, I've answered both parts, and that's what I want you to be aware of, that you need to answer both parts of the question. Okay, let's go on to the next two. Examples 3 and 4. Example 3. It tells us that AB is 14.6 centimeters. We want to find CB. And if we look, we have these hash marks. Remember, those hash marks mean that they are congruent. Congruent means that they're equal or they have the same measure. Alright? Well, let's label our picture. AB is 14.6. The whole thing is 14.6. Now, these two other pieces, they're exactly the same measure, so there are 2 equal parts here. To figure out what they would be, I can take 14.6 and divide it by 2. Cut it in half, because that's really what my point C does. It cuts the line segment in half. So 14.6 divided by 2 is 7.3, and that would be my answer, 7.3 centimeters. Okay, that one's pretty easy. Congruent, a lot of times you can divide by 2, or you might be able to multiply by 2. You got to use a different idea. You can't always just add things together. Okay? Last example here, example 4. Determine the value of c and the measure of yz if y is between x and z. xy is 2c plus 1, yz is 6c, and xz is 81. All right, they didn't give us a picture this time, so we need to draw a picture. Okay, that's our first step. This is the first time we've had to do that. So we start with the line segment. We need to know what our two endpoints are. And it says that up here. If y is between x and z, that means x and z are our endpoints, and y is somewhere in the middle of them. It doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't say that they're congruent, so don't put it in the middle and mark them congruent. That's not part of our words. It just says it's between. All right, good. We've drawn a picture now. Now we need to label our picture. Well, xz is 81. xy is 2c plus 1. And yz is 6c. All right, looks like the problems we've done before. We need to set up an equation. Remember, the two smaller pieces will add to the whole. So 2c plus 1 plus 6c, those are our two small pieces, equals 81, the whole thing. Now we solve this. Let's combine our c's. Gives us 8. 2c plus 6c is 8c plus 1 equals 81. Next step is to subtract 1. We want to get c on one side by itself. So 8c equals 81 minus 1 is 80. Now we divide by 8. C equals 80 divided by 8 is 10. Now, do not stop here, because if we go back to the problem, it says determine the value of c and the measure of yz. So we've only found half of our answer. Okay, make sure you answer the question. All right, we need to know what yz is. Well, we know yz is 6c, and we found c to be 10. So we're going to plug in that 10 for c. 6 times 10 is 60. They did not give us a label on this one, so we don't have to put anything on there. No centimeters, no inches. But we do say yz equals 60. And now we've answered the question. We've answered both parts. All right, those are your notes on understanding what between means and using those words. So if you have any questions on these 4 examples, make sure you bring them to class next time.